Blood isn't just red liquid running through our veins. Sometimes, it's a secret that can bring down kingdoms. In 1750, the Grand Palace of Aldovia stood like a giant against the sky. Its walls weren't just stone. They were the line between the rich who ruled and the poor who suffered. Inside those walls, a young woman named Elise arrived on a misty morning. Her simple dress and quiet eyes hid a storm inside her heart. To everyone watching, she was just another servant, a nobody coming to care for the 5-year-old Prince Edward. But Elise was no ordinary nanny. "This way, girl," the head servant growled, leading her through hallways that sparkled with gold and crystal. "Remember your place. Speak only when spoken to. Touch nothing that isn't yours." Elise kept her eyes down, hiding the fire that burned inside them. She nodded politely, playing the part of a grateful servant. "Yes, sir. I understand." What no one knew, what no one could ever know, was that Elise Durant was really Elise Fontaine, daughter of Thomas Fontaine, the rebel leader who had almost overthrown the king 10 years earlier. The same Thomas Fontaine who had been beheaded in the town square, while young Elise watched from the crowd, her mother's hand clamped over her mouth to stop her screams. "The prince is a difficult child," the servant continued. "The last 3 nannies quit within a month. Don't expect this position to last." Elise smiled softly. "I don't plan on leaving anytime soon." And she meant it, but not for the reasons they thought. Outside the palace walls, a secret group waited. The Scarlet Brotherhood, followers of her father who had spent 10 years rebuilding their strength, waiting for the perfect moment to finish what Thomas Fontaine had started. And Elise was their key. "This is your room," the servant said, opening a small door near the prince's chambers. "You begin your duties tonight. The prince often has nightmares." As soon as she was alone, Elise pulled out a small locket, the only thing she had left of her father. Inside was a tiny piece of paper with a message written in her father's hand. "Remember who you are." For 3 years, Elise had trained for this moment. She had learned how to speak like a proper servant, how to care for children, how to move through noble houses without being noticed. Also, she could enter the palace walls and discover its secrets, the weak spots in the royal armor. Her mission was simple: gain the trust of the royal family, learn their routines, their secrets, their vulnerabilities. Then, when the time was right, open the gates for the Brotherhood. The monarchy that had killed her father would finally fall. But missions are never really simple, are they? That evening, Elise met young Prince Edward for the first time. She expected to find a spoiled royal brat, the perfect symbol of everything she hated. Instead, she found a small boy with sad eyes, sitting alone in a massive bedroom filled with toys he didn't seem to care about. "Are you going to leave too?" were his first words to her. Elise's practiced smile faltered as something unexpected tugged at her heart. "My name is Elise," she said, kneeling to his level. "And no, Your Highness, I'm not going anywhere." The prince studied her face carefully, as if searching for lies he was too used to finding. "Everyone leaves," he said simply. What Elise didn't know then, what she couldn't know, was that her path into the palace had just become much more dangerous. Because the hardest person to betray is the one you've promised to protect. And the most dangerous secret isn't who you really are. It's what you're about to become. Days turn to weeks. Weeks turn to months. With each passing sunrise, Elise's plan grew more complicated. Prince Edward wasn't just a target anymore. He was a child who waited by the window for her every morning, whose eyes lit up when she entered the room. "Tell me another story about the world outside," he would beg as she tucked him into bed each night. And Elise would tell him tales of villages and markets, of farmers and craftsmen, carefully changed versions of her own childhood. Stories that didn't mention hunger or soldiers taking food from hungry families. By day, she did as she was ordered by the Brotherhood. She mapped the palace halls, counted the guards, noted which doors were locked and when. Every 2 weeks, she left a message in a hollow tree in the royal gardens, updates for those waiting to strike. But by night, something else was happening. Something dangerous. "Why do you look sad sometimes?" the prince asked her one evening as she combed his hair. Elise froze. "I'm not sad, Your Highness." "Yes, you are," he insisted with a child's certainty. "When you think I'm not looking." Is it because you miss your family? The question hit like a knife. Elise's hand trembled slightly. Yes, she admitted softly. I miss them very much. Edward turned and looked up at her with eyes too serious for a child. My mother died when I was born. Father says it's my fault. Elise's heart cracked. Without thinking, she pulled him close. No, sweet boy, it wasn't your fault. Not ever. That night, a servant knocked on her door. The king requests your presence. Fear gripped Elise's throat. Had she been discovered? Had someone recognized her? The throne room stretched before her, impossibly long. At the far end sat King Richard, a hard man with cold eyes, the man who had ordered her father's execution. Elise knelt, keeping her eyes down, her heart hammering against her ribs. My son speaks highly of you, the king said, his voice echoing off marble walls. He smiles now. He sleeps through the night. I'm happy to serve, your majesty. Elise replied, her voice steady despite her fear. Edward's birthday celebration is in 3 days. The palace will be filled with nobles from across Europe. He wants you by his side. This was it, the perfect opportunity for the Brotherhood. All the kingdom's powerful people in one place. As you wish, your majesty, she said. That night, Elise left an urgent message. The time has come. 3 days. Royal celebration. But as she walked back through the sleeping palace, a guard stopped her. Lady Elise, the prince is asking for you. Another nightmare. She found Edward sitting up in bed, tears on his cheeks. I dreamt they took you away, he whispered as she held him. I'm right here, she soothed. Promise you'll stay forever? He asked, his small hand holding hers. The weight of her lie crushed down on her. I'll be here as long as you need me, she said carefully. Later, alone in her room, Elise took out her father's locket. Remember who you are, it said. But who was she now? The dutiful daughter carrying out her father's revenge? Or the protector of a child who trusted her completely? 2 days before the celebration, Elise was summoned again, not to the king, but to the royal spymaster, Lord Blackwood. His office was small and dark, walls lined with maps and letters. His eyes seemed to see right through her. Tell me, Miss Durant, he said, using the false name she had given, have you noticed anything unusual during your time here? Anyone showing too much interest in the royal family's activities? Elise kept her face calm, even as panic flared inside her. No, my lord, nothing unusual. Lord Blackwood smiled thinly. There are whispers of plots against the crown, whispers of the Scarlet Brotherhood rising again. He leaned forward. If you see anything suspicious, you'll report it immediately. Of course, my lord, she promised, the lie bitter on her tongue. As she turned to leave, he spoke again. One more thing. Did you ever visit the northern provinces? I believe the late Thomas Fontaine had supporters there. Elise's blood ran cold. She turned, forcing her face to show innocent confusion. Who is Thomas Fontaine, my lord? Lord Blackwood watched her for a long, terrible moment. A traitor, he said finally. A man who would have destroyed everything for his foolish ideas of equality. That night, Elise couldn't sleep. The walls of the palace seemed to be closing in around her. Tomorrow, she would need to decide. Betray the prince who loved her, or betray her father's memory. And someone in the palace was already suspicious. Time was running out. The celebration day arrived. The palace sparkled with 1,000 candles. Lords and ladies in silks and jewels filled the grand hall, their laughter echoing off marble walls. Elise stood beside Prince Edward, dressed in new clothes the king had ordered made for her, finer than anything she had worn before. The soft blue fabric felt like a disguise, another layer of lies. You look pretty, Edward whispered, holding her hand tightly as nobles bowed to him. Thank you, your highness, she replied with a smile that hid her storm of emotions. Every few minutes, Elise glanced at the tall clock against the wall. At exactly 9 o'clock, the Brotherhood would strike. She had told them which doors would be unguarded, which passages to use. 8 o'clock came and went. Lord Blackwood circled the room like a hawk, his eyes constantly returning to her. Did he know? Was he just waiting for proof? Elise, I'm tired, Edward said softly. Can we go somewhere quiet? This was her chance to get the prince away from the hall before the attack. Of course, she said, leading him toward the garden doors. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, a figure emerged from the shadows. Elise Fontaine, a man's voice said quietly. She froze, pushing Edward behind her protectively. The man stepped forward. It was Mark, her father's oldest friend, the leader of the Brotherhood. It's time, he said simply. Edward looked up at her, confusion in his eyes. Fontaine? Who is this man? Why did he call you that? Mark's face hardened. You haven't told him? The son of the monster who executed your father. Stop, Elise whispered, but it was too late. Your father killed my mother, Edward said, backing away from her. Everyone says he was a bad man who wanted to hurt people. That's a lie. Mark snapped. Thomas Fontaine wanted freedom for all people. The king murdered him for it. Edward's eyes filled with tears as he looked at Elise. Is that true? Are you here to hurt us? The moment of truth crashed down around her. Everything she had worked for, everything she had promised her father. I was, she admitted softly, but not anymore. Mark's face twisted with anger. Your father died for our cause. My father died because of hate, Elise replied. And I won't let more people die for the same reason. She knelt before the prince. Edward, your father did terrible things, but so have many others. This cycle of revenge has to stop. Suddenly, guard shouts erupted from inside the palace. The attack had begun without her. You must choose now, Mark hissed. Your father's memory or this royal brat. Elise stood tall, placing herself between Mark and the prince. I choose peace, she said firmly. Get him away from here now. Mark spat at her feet. Traitor to your blood. He turned and disappeared into the darkness. Elise grabbed Edward's hand. We have to hurry. People are going to get hurt. As they ran through the garden, the sound of fighting grew louder. Elise's mind raced. She had to stop this before it became a bloodbath. They slipped through a servant's entrance and found themselves in a deserted hallway. In the distance, steel clashed against steel. I need to get you somewhere safe, she told Edward. No, he said, suddenly looking older than his years. I need to see my father. I can make him listen. Edward, it's too dangerous. I'm still your prince, he said with sudden authority, and I command you to take me to my father. Elise hesitated, then nodded. This brave child might be their only hope. They crept through the palace, avoiding pockets of fighting. The Brotherhood had managed to enter, but the royal guards were holding them back. Outside the king's chambers, they found chaos. Bodies lay on the marble floor. Lord Blackwood stood with a bloody sword, defending the door with just 3 guards. The prince, one guard shouted when he saw them. Lord Blackwood's eyes narrowed when he saw Elise. Seize that woman. She's with the rebels. No, Edward shouted, stepping in front of her. She saved me. She wants to stop the fighting. Lord Blackwood paused. In that moment, the king's door swung open. King Richard stood there, sword in hand, face pale with fury. His eyes locked on Elise, then shifted to his son. Edward, come here, he commanded. The young prince stood his ground. Father, you must listen. People are dying. These traitors attacked us, the king growled. Just like Fontaine did years ago. I know who she is, Edward said, gesturing to Elise. And she could have let them kill me. But she didn't. The king's eyes widened as he finally recognized her. Fontaine's daughter. Yes, Elise said, meeting his gaze without fear. I am Thomas Fontaine's daughter. I came here to destroy you. She took a deep breath. But now I'm asking you to save your kingdom instead. In the silence that followed, the fate of the kingdom hung in the balance. A betrayed king, a brave prince, a woman caught between 2 worlds. And outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. The king's chamber fell silent. Only the distant sounds of fighting echoed through the palace. Why should I listen to the daughter of a traitor? King Richard demanded, his knuckles white around his sword hilt. Because your son believes in me, Elise answered, and because enough blood has been spilled. Young Edward stepped forward, showing courage beyond his years. Father, she's been teaching me about the people outside our walls. They're hungry and afraid, just like we are right now. The king looked at his son with surprise, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. The Brotherhood fights because they see no other way, Elise continued. My father believed in a world where nobility came from one's actions, not one's birth. Lord Blackwood scoffed. Pretty words from rebels who came with swords. And what choice did they have? Elise challenged. When speaking truth became treason. A crash sounded from down the hall. The fighting was getting closer. We don't have much time, Elise urged. You can kill more rebels today, Your Majesty, but more will rise tomorrow. Or you can break this cycle now. The king's face darkened. By surrendering my crown? Never. Not by surrendering, Edward said suddenly. By sharing. All eyes turned to the small boy. My tutor taught me that the strongest kingdoms are those where kings listen to their people, Edward explained. Where everyone has enough food and no one is afraid. Elise felt pride swell in her chest. This child understood what generations of rulers had missed. King Richard looked conflicted. Then, to everyone's shock, he lowered his sword. What would you have me do? He asked Elise. Show yourself to the people. Promise to hear their concerns. Create a council with members from all parts of society, including the Brotherhood. And if I refuse, then this night will end in more death, she said simply. Including, perhaps, your own. The king studied her face, searching for deceit. Finding none, he nodded slowly. Lord Blackwood, call for a ceasefire. I will address both sides. What happened next would be told in whispers for generations. The king of Aldovia stood on the palace balcony, bloodied but unbowed, his son at his side and a rebel's daughter behind him. He raised his hands for silence as fighters from both sides gathered in the courtyard below. Today marks the end of one Aldovia and the birth of another, he declared. No longer will the palace walls divide us from our people. From this day forward, we will govern together. Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. This child, he continued, placing his hand on Edward's shoulder, has shown me what it truly means to rule. Not with fear, but with wisdom. He turned to Elise. And this woman, daughter of Thomas Fontaine, has shown me what courage truly is. Mark stepped forward from the rebel forces, sword still in hand. Pretty words, but words are wind. Not words, King Richard replied. Action. Tomorrow, we form a royal council. You will help choose its members. The people's voices will be heard. That night, as the wounded were tended and the dead mourned, Elise sat alone in the palace garden. The weight of years of hatred and planning had lifted from her shoulders, leaving her uncertain of her place in this new world. What happens now? Edward asked, appearing beside her. Elise smiled sadly. I should leave. Many will never trust me. I trust you, the prince said firmly. And father wants you to stay. He told me. Elise looked surprised. As your nanny? Edward shook his head. As our bridge to the people. Father says you understand both worlds. And so it came to pass. The daughter of a rebel became the voice of the common people in a kingdom being reborn. The path wasn't easy. Old hatreds don't die in a day. There were those in the palace who whispered against her, and those among the rebels who called her traitor. But each day, the walls between the palace and the people crumbled a little more. 5 years later, as Prince Edward celebrated his 10th birthday, he asked Elise a question that had long been on his mind. Do you ever regret not following your father's path? Elise thought carefully before answering. My father wanted justice. He just didn't live to see that justice sometimes comes in unexpected ways. She looked out over the city, where markets now flourished and children played freely in streets patrolled by guards who protected rather than threatened. The greatest revolution, she told the young prince who would one day be a different kind of king, isn't the one that destroys what is wrong, but the one that builds what is right. History remembers King Richard as the monarch who transformed a kingdom. It remembers Prince Edward as the ruler who completed what his father began. But in the villages and towns, people tell a different story of a brave young woman who entered the palace with vengeance in her heart and left it having planted the seeds of peace. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a sword or an army. Sometimes it's the courage to put down your weapon when revenge is within your grasp. And sometimes true revolution comes not from destroying your enemies, but from finding the humanity in them.